The work that I'm showing at Blue Coat is called In the Future They Ate from the Finest Porcelain, and it's basically a body of work that I've been constantly kind of adding to. So you see quite a few pieces that have been shown already in various parts of the UK, but there are a couple of new pieces that I'm showing at Blue Coat, and they're a big installation, and another one is of photographs that document the performance. The idea behind the show is it's tackling archaeology and how that's been instrumentalized as a political tool, especially in the case of Israel and Palestine. And it's something that you can kind of really see in a wider picture wherever conflict is involved, and how the world really functions as who tells the story, who tells the narrative. And it is part of the show is actually a concentration on how do you intervene with that narrative history and how you can change the course of history. And that is done by way of fictional film that actually really addresses the present-day reality of political problems in Palestine and the Israeli occupation. And also with a real actual performance of intervening archaeologically in Israel and Palestine to change that narrative. So it's in an attempt to kind of address what's going on politically, but in a completely different way, different than what you see, say, in the news. So it's an attempt to look at it from a completely different angle. In the film, you see the heroine who calls herself a narrative terrorist. She's trying to change the narrative of history by planting various porcelain that carry with it the DNA of Palestinians for future archaeologists to excavate and find. In the new installation, is based on part of the Old Testament, where you see where God sends the plague, or the 7 or 10 plagues, I'm not sure, I should have researched more, on the Egyptians for imprisoning the Jewish people. And the plague that I am showing are the locusts, when the locust comes and eats everything in Egypt. And he sent 7 or 10 plagues as a warning sign that for the Egyptians to free the Jewish people. And this is kind of like a replay of that, where you see the locust plague in the gallery. And it's, again, it's supposed to kind of serve as an omen, or as a warning sign of how things will could look if things are left unchanged, and if we let things continue as they are politically. I know that science fiction doesn't really is not the first thing you think of when you think of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I've always worked mostly with documentary, and the more I worked with documentary, the more people didn't believe what I was saying. Because what's happening in Israel and Palestine is really so surreal that people kind of start thinking that maybe I am biased because I do come from one side of that narrative. So for me, it just became much more honest to work in a more surreal way. And I felt that it adds more to that dialogue, because in a way you see a lot of documentaries about Palestine, and that also puts the Palestinians in a very disadvantaged position. When you constantly analyze people, they become the analyzed and you're the analyzer, the outsider who analyzes them. So I wanted the audience to be on the same par as the people that they watch in the film. And therefore I wanted the films to be more seductive than really kind of like a documentary about people you should sympathize with, but more people that you are interested in. And I think that kind of changes the balance, and it's an important balance to change.